The fluorescent lights in room 412 of Chicago General hummed at a frequency of exactly 60 Hz. I noticed this because my older brother David was currently screaming at me. His face was a deep shade of crimson. He pointed a finger inches from my nose while my mother lay heavily sedated in the bed behind him. The medical bill rested on the tray table. The total was exactly $48,622.15. My sister Sarah stood by the door with her arms crossed. She wore a designer coat that cost more than my first car. She told me I was being entirely unreasonable. They demanded I liquidate my stock portfolio to cover the immediate surgical deposit. I am Elias. I am 34 years old. I live and work in the center of downtown Chicago. I work as a senior financial systems architect for a global logistics firm. My job involves tracing millions of dollars across international borders. I design automated ledgers that prevent corporate embezzlement. I do not react to sudden emotional outbursts. I simply observe them. David slammed his hand on the metal table. He told me it was my duty as the single son to handle this burden. He claimed his real estate investments were temporarily illiquid. Sarah chimed in to say her boutique marketing agency was going through a rebranding phase. They were lying. I knew this because I had configured the family trust routing system 3 years ago. I possessed full read access to their primary checking accounts. Before we continue, where are you listening to this right now? What time is it in your part of the world? Tell me below. As David continued his aggressive tirade about familial loyalty, I felt my pulse remain completely steady. I did not raise my voice or shed a single tear. I calmly looked at the itemized hospital invoice. I noted the specific payment gateway the billing department used. It was a standard encrypted portal. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone. I logged into the master administrative dashboard for the family trust. I initiated a complete and permanent freeze on all secondary user credentials. I watched the system confirm the lockdown. My family thought they had successfully cornered me into financial submission. They had no idea I held the absolute keys to their survival. The financial arrangement began 4 years ago. Our father passed away from a sudden myocardial infarction. He left behind a disorganized estate. The total liquid assets amounted to exactly $1,204,000. David and Sarah possessed zero financial literacy. They demanded immediate disbursements to fund their respective lifestyles. I was the only one capable of structuring the capital. I established the Peterson Family Revocable Trust. I designed a custom automated disbursement algorithm. It was built on a secure Python backend. The system routed monthly living stipends directly to their primary accounts. I programmed it to yield optimal tax efficiency. I took no management fee. I simply wanted to ensure our mother was financially secure. I set her medical escrow account as the highest priority tier. My siblings viewed the trust as an infinite well. David purchased a third commercial property in a gentrifying district. He initiated a wire transfer of $82,500. He categorized it under the vague label of administrative overhead. Sarah launched her boutique agency using trust capital. She withdrew $47,990 over 6 months. She claimed it was essential seed funding. They never checked the principal balance. They never calculated the compound interest degradation. They operated purely on entitlement. They assumed my quiet administration meant unlimited compliance. Whenever the algorithm flagged an overdrawn request, they resorted to emotional manipulation. Sarah would leave voicemails crying about her anxiety. David would send long texts accusing me of hoarding the family legacy. I never argued with them. I simply adjusted the internal ledger. I meticulously documented every single transaction. I logged the IP addresses for every withdrawal request. I archived their demanding emails on a secure offline server. I built a comprehensive digital footprint of their financial parasitism. I knew the exact velocity of their spending. They drained the secondary accounts while ignoring the primary objective. Our mother required specialized neurological care. The monthly cost was $6,200. David and Sarah consistently voted to defer her premium treatments. They argued we needed the capital for more immediate investments. Their greed was not a sudden tragedy. It was a predictable data trend. I observed their behavior like a statistician monitoring a failing system. They were a bad investment. I decided to let their failing system finally crash. The data proved they were beyond reasonable repair. My siblings had no idea how the trust actually functioned. They thought money simply materialized in their accounts on the first of every month. The reality was a highly complex digital infrastructure. I built the entire system using enterprise-grade architecture. I utilized a secure API gateway to connect the central trust ledger to their personal banks. Every single transaction required a cryptographic token to validate the transfer. I paid the monthly server hosting costs myself. It was exactly $112.40. I also managed the automated clearinghouse batch processing. This was the mechanism that actually moved the physical capital across state lines. I configured custom Python scripts to execute these transfers at precisely 2 a.m. This ensured the funds were available when David bought his morning coffee. Their ignorance was my absolute greatest asset. They never asked for the master encryption keys. They never wondered who handled the complex tax compliance reporting. I filed the quarterly estimated tax payments manually. I calculated the exact capital gains offsets required to keep the federal agents away. Last year alone, I saved the estate $43,210. I accomplished this through meticulous strategic loss harvesting. David believed his real estate acumen was the ultimate source of his wealth. Sarah thought her marketing genius kept her failing business entirely afloat. They were entirely oblivious to the invisible digital safety net I wove beneath them. I held absolute root access to the central database server. I possessed the master administrative credentials for every linked financial portal. I held the power to revoke their access with a single keystroke. I could see the exact moment Sarah authorized a payment for a luxury spa retreat. The charge was for $895. I logged the exact second David transferred funds to cover a bad contracting debt. His wire transfer totaled $12,400. They treated me like a silent public utility. They assumed the power grid would simply always remain active. They relied entirely on my unseen labor to fund their daily delusions of grandeur. I was the silent architect of their entire financial reality. I had carefully installed a very specific administrative kill switch during the initial build phase. They were completely unaware of its hidden existence within the source code. I was finally ready to trigger the system shutdown. I remained standing in the fluorescent glare of the hospital room. David continued to shout about the injustice of his supposed financial burden. He insisted that I immediately authorize a complete liquidation of my personal index funds. I calmly looked down at the illuminated screen of my mobile device. I opened the secure terminal emulator application designed for remote server administration. The hospital billing department required exactly $48,622.15. The family trust currently held $312,410 in liquid cash reserves. This capital was explicitly earmarked for the ongoing medical care of our mother. David and Sarah were actively conspiring to steal these vital funds for themselves. This blatant act of financial betrayal served as my definitive and logical breaking point. I tapped the command line interface on my secure mobile device. I entered the encrypted root administrator password using a virtual keyboard. I accessed the automated clearinghouse routing protocols within the system architecture. I navigated directly to the active user directory hosted on the main server. I located the specific digital profiles belonging to both David and Sarah. I initiated the irreversible revocation command sequence for their specific user IDs. I changed their internal account status from active beneficiaries to suspended entities. I executed a custom script that permanently nullified their cryptographic authorization tokens. I terminated the application programming interface connection to their personal banking institutions. The digital connection severed instantly without generating a single automated warning notification. The scheduled monthly automated living disbursements were permanently and irrevocably cancelled. I did not stop my administrative actions with the Central Trust Fund. David used a corporate credit card tied directly to my primary enterprise account. He used this specific card to quietly fund the renovations on his commercial properties. I logged into the corporate banking portal using my secondary biometric authentication key. I navigated to the secondary cardholder management dashboard located in the Administration tab. I selected his specific Visa card number ending in 4829. I clicked the specific security button to report the card as administratively frozen. Sarah relied heavily on my professional enterprise software licenses for her marketing agency. She used my master administrator account to access her entire client database system. The recurring monthly subscription cost was exactly $499. I accessed the centralized software vendor management portal to restrict her permissions. I revoked her designated user seat allocation with a single deliberate keystroke. Her entire operational marketing database was now permanently locked behind a corporate paywall. I looked up from the glowing screen of my phone. David was still aggressively demanding that I call my investment broker. I remained completely silent and simply nodded my head in quiet acknowledgement. I turned and walked purposefully out of the sterile hospital room. My pulse remained perfectly calm as I walked toward the main elevator bank. I had completely severed their financial lifelines in less than 2 minutes. The automated systems executed my commands precisely at midnight. David was standing in line at a luxury building supply depot the following morning. He attempted to purchase $1,200 worth of imported hardwood flooring. The cashier informed him his corporate credit card was completely declined. He immediately attempted to initiate a manual wire transfer from the trust account. The secure application programming interface rejected his transaction token as invalid. He tried to call the automated banking hotline to bypass the digital block. The automated system politely informed him his beneficiary status was permanently suspended. Sarah experienced the systemic shutdown during a major client presentation. She attempted to access her centralized marketing database to show a rendering. The enterprise software flashed a red critical error message across the screen. It stated her specific user license was currently revoked by the system administrator. She tried to log into the backend server to manually download the client files. Her access credentials were automatically rejected by the Zero Trust security architecture. Her entire agency was paralyzed in front of a prospective corporate client. My phone remained completely silent for exactly 3 hours. The first aggressive text message arrived precisely at 10 in the morning. David demanded to know why the corporate banking portal was malfunctioning. He ordered me to immediately reset the master server authorization tokens. Sarah called my office line 14 times in a span of 20 minutes. She left a hysterical voicemail accusing me of sabotaging her entire livelihood. She claimed she would lose a $20,000 contract because of my incompetence. I did not respond to their frantic digital communications. I maintained absolute radio silence while observing their panic through the server logs. The system documented exactly 42 failed login attempts from David's primary IP address. Sarah triggered 13 separate security alerts trying to brute force the database password. I watched their entitlement transform rapidly into absolute administrative terror. They suddenly realized the silent public utility was permanently shut down. David sent a final threatening email from his personal account. He explicitly stated he would hire a forensic accountant to audit the entire trust. He threatened to sue me for gross financial negligence and breach of fiduciary duty. He claimed he had legal documentation proving my systematic mismanagement of the estate. I read the email while sipping a cup of black coffee at my desk. His threat was completely devoid of any actual legal or factual merit. He had absolutely no idea that I possessed a flawless digital paper trail. Every single transaction they ever made was securely archived in an immutable ledger. I was fully prepared for their inevitable escalation. David's threat of a forensic audit was mathematically illiterate. He assumed the digital ledger was a subjective document that could be easily manipulated. He clearly did not understand the core concept of an immutable blockchain architecture. I had mirrored the master trust database using a SHA-256 cryptographic hash function. Every single withdrawal they ever made was permanently stamped with a verifiable digital signature. I opened my primary enterprise data visualization software to begin the final data extraction. I ran a complex SQL query to isolate David's specific capital gains liabilities. He had illegally classified his commercial property renovations as primary trust operational expenses. He systematically funneled exactly $114,820 through a registered shell LLC. I extracted the corresponding network metadata linking his personal IP address directly to the creation of the LLC. The server timestamp proved he initiated the fraudulent wire transfer while sitting in our mother's living room. He had literally stolen her critical medical funds while eating her weekly groceries. Sarah was equally reckless with her own digital footprint. She had fraudulently categorized her luxury spa retreat as an intensive corporate networking seminar. She brazenly expensed an additional $6,410 for a supposed outsourced marketing consultant. I cross-referenced the specific vendor identification numbers against a global corporate registry database. The alleged marketing consultant was actually her personal fitness instructor based in Los Angeles. She had committed blatant federal wire fraud using the national banking system. I methodically compiled these specific data points into a comprehensive evidentiary dossier. I exported the raw server logs into a clean comma-separated values file. I generated a highly detailed pivot table demonstrating their exact chronological pattern of financial abuse. The total sum of misappropriated capital equaled precisely $212,090. I attached the original cryptographic certificates to mathematically prove the extracted data was completely unadulterated. No legal team in the entire country could successfully challenge the absolute certainty of this audit. I burned the entire compiled dossier onto 3 separate encrypted physical flash drives. I drafted a formal cease and desist letter using standard corporate legal templates. I explicitly detailed their repeated violations of the original fiduciary trust agreement. I did not include a single word of emotional language or personal grievances in the final document. I simply stated the exact monetary damages and the corresponding federal statutes they had willfully violated. I placed the encrypted physical drives into 3 heavy manila envelopes. I printed the official shipping labels using my automated thermal barcode printer. I was methodically preparing to establish total operational dominance over my siblings. I had successfully transformed their own staggering greed into an inescapable digital snare. They walked directly into my administrative trap with their eyes wide open. My flawless financial ledger was now fully locked and loaded. I verified the automated courier pickup schedule for the following morning. The trap was perfectly set. I simply had to patiently wait. The ambush occurred precisely 48 hours after the initial system lockout. I was sitting in the sterile cafeteria on the ground floor of Chicago General. I was reviewing the real-time telemetry data for a regional supply chain server on my laptop. David and Sarah suddenly slid into the plastic booth directly across from me. They clearly coordinated this deliberate physical interception. Sarah held a large iced coffee and wore a perfectly rehearsed expression of deep sisterly concern. David looked uncharacteristically subdued and kept his hands folded neatly on the table. Sarah began the conversation by placing a gentle hand over my laptop keyboard. She spoke in a soft tone designed to simulate genuine emotional vulnerability. She told me the family needed to remain a cohesive unit during this medical crisis. She claimed her earlier hysterical voicemails were simply the result of severe clinical exhaustion. David nodded slowly and offered a practiced sigh of fabricated regret. He apologized for his aggressive tone in the hospital room 2 days prior. He suggested we had all simply misunderstood the complex financial parameters of the estate. Their sudden shift in tactical behavior was highly predictable. They realized brute force network attacks and legal threats were entirely ineffective against my administrative barriers. They were now attempting to utilize social engineering to regain their lost system access. David pulled a completely unsealed manila folder from his leather briefcase. He pushed a hastily drafted legal contract across the synthetic grain of the cafeteria table. He claimed it was a standard mutual non-disclosure agreement paired with a digital proxy authorization. The document would legally transfer the master encryption keys directly to his personal control. He framed this legal transfer as a generous effort to relieve my immense administrative burden. He promised to personally handle all future interactions with the hospital billing department. Sarah added that my specialized technical skills were far too valuable to waste on mundane accounting tasks. They were attempting to gaslight me into voluntarily surrendering my root access. I ignored their emotional performance and analyzed the physical documents sitting in front of me. I immediately recognized the boilerplate legal formatting. He had downloaded a generic template from a discount legal website. The contract contained 3 glaring syntactical errors in the very first printed paragraph. It fundamentally misunderstood the crucial legal difference between a standard revocable trust and a corporate limited liability structure. The signature line demanded the immediate transfer of physical hardware security tokens that did not actually even exist. I looked at their expectant faces and felt my resting heart rate maintain its completely steady rhythm. I did not verbally reject their completely absurd legal proposition. I simply folded the invalid printed contract into a precise symmetrical square and placed it in my coat pocket. I closed my laptop and slowly stood up from the plastic booth without uttering a single spoken word. I left them sitting in the silent cafeteria while I calmly headed back to the medical elevator bank. The inevitable confrontation took place inside the primary conference room of the hospital patient advocacy wing. David had aggressively invited our extended family and a supposed legal mediator. My aunt and uncle sat near the back of the room. A hospital financial director sat at the head of the heavy mahogany table. David stood by a digital projector screen. He began to loudly declare that I was unlawfully withholding critical medical funds. He demanded the immediate transfer of all trust assets to his personal control. I walked to the front of the room and placed my encrypted laptop on the table. I connected my machine directly to the hospital presentation matrix. I did not raise my voice or address David directly. I opened the comprehensive evidentiary dossier I had compiled. The first slide illuminated the dark room with a massive high-definition spreadsheet. It displayed the exact routing numbers for David's secret shell corporation. I calmly read the primary ledger entries aloud. I detailed the $114,820 he stole. I explained how he illegally funneled our mother's medical capital to renovate his commercial properties. The room fell entirely silent. Before I dropped the final evidence. Have you ever watched a manipulator realize they are completely trapped? How do they usually react when the exit is blocked? Tell me your experience below. I advanced to the second slide. It contained the highly specific digital footprint of Sarah's blatant wire fraud. I displayed the vendor identification numbers matching her personal Los Angeles fitness instructor. I highlighted the $6,410 she classified as corporate networking. I projected the actual IP address timestamps linking her phone directly to the unauthorized banking transfers. I explained that an IP address is a unique digital fingerprint. It permanently proves exactly where a device is located when a transaction occurs. Her digital fingerprint was recorded directly on the master server. The hospital financial director stopped taking notes and stared at the screen. My uncle asked David if these financial records were accurate. David stammered and claimed the data was illegally fabricated. He lacked the technical vocabulary to effectively argue against a cryptographic hash function. I projected the unalterable digital certificates validating the absolute authenticity of the server logs. I then distributed the physical manila envelopes to the legal mediator and the hospital director. The envelopes contained the formal cease and desist letters. They also held the drafted federal tax fraud disclosures. I informed the room that these exact files were already scheduled for final delivery. They were heading to the Criminal Investigation Division of the Internal Revenue Service. The automated courier had picked up the packages at exactly 8 in the morning. I closed my encrypted laptop and disconnected the high-definition video cable. The public utility was now permanently dismantling their entire fraudulent existence. Their meticulously constructed reality was collapsing entirely under the crushing weight of empirical data. I watched the panic finally reach their wide eyes. The digital packages arrived at the federal agency at exactly 9 in the morning. The systemic collapse of their artificial lives was swift and mathematically inevitable. A senior forensic auditor at the Internal Revenue Service flagged David's shell corporation within 48 hours. They initiated an immediate asset freeze on his 3 commercial properties pending a full criminal investigation. His primary real estate investors panicked when the automated compliance software triggered a severe federal lien alert. The alert effectively blacklisted his entire development portfolio across the global banking network. David defaulted on a massive bridge loan totaling $2,450,000. His financial ruin was absolute. Sarah faced a similar structural implosion. Her boutique marketing agency was built entirely on a foundation of stolen trust capital. The hospital director forwarded the fraud dossier to the Regional Chamber of Commerce. Her most lucrative corporate client demanded an immediate forensic review of their active billing accounts. They discovered she had systematically overcharged them by $41,200. The client immediately filed a civil lawsuit for gross professional negligence and corporate fraud. Her agency dissolved in less than 7 business days. She was forced to break the expensive lease on her downtown office space. The penalty fee was exactly $14,850. I watched their frantic social media updates shift from curated luxury to absolute chaotic despair. David attempted to call my secure encrypted phone line 27 times in a single afternoon. I routed his specific phone number directly to a disconnected automated server response. Sarah sent a barrage of emails begging for a temporary micro-loan to cover her legal retainers. I configured a custom email filter. It automatically deleted any message containing the words loan or attorney or help. The medical escrow account was now completely secure and adequately funded for the next 5 years. I authorized the initial surgical deposit of $48,622.15. The automated hospital billing API processed the digital transaction in less than 4 seconds. My mother was immediately scheduled for her critical neurological procedure. I successfully optimized the failing system by permanently excising the corrupted variables. Their profound entitlement was no longer my administrative problem. I deleted the temporary logs and closed my laptop. Their influence was officially purged from the primary network registry. I felt absolute silence. I sat in the quiet waiting room on the surgical floor. The ambient noise level was exactly 42 decibels. The digital display above the heavy double doors indicated the procedure was currently in the final stabilization phase. My phone remained completely devoid of any frantic notifications. The Peterson Family Revocable Trust was now running at absolute peak operational efficiency. The master ledger was finally balanced. David and Sarah were facing the harsh reality of their mathematical choices. They assumed family was an unalterable biological contract that completely superseded basic accounting principles. They were fundamentally and categorically incorrect. A biological family is simply another highly complex network system. When specific internal components become deeply parasitic, the system must either surgically purge them or collapse entirely. I chose to initiate the permanent purge protocol. Do you believe some biological bridges are mathematically required to burn? Tell me your final verdict in the comments below. I checked the automated secure server logs one last time. The central firewall was effectively deflecting minor unauthorized access attempts from Sarah's personal Internet Protocol address. Her digital desperation was registering as faint background static on my secure terminal monitor. I closed the command line interface and manually locked the display screen. I felt a profound sense of total operational equilibrium. I had fully protected the primary asset and successfully neutralized the lingering structural threats. The automated medical system required one final administrative authorization token to physically discharge my mother to the cardiac recovery ward. I approved the pending hospital transaction with a single deliberate keystroke. The encrypted digital network verified my administrative credentials instantly. The crushing burden of their endless entitlement was permanently lifted from my tired shoulders. The raw data was perfectly clean. The cold silence was beautiful.